7 guys from a small agency in South Korea rewrote the rules of global pop culture. BTS didn't just top charts, they spoke at the United Nations, broke records that stood for decades, and built a fanbase so loyal it operates like a small nation. But here's what rarely gets talked about: the moments that tested that loyalty. Because behind the sold-out stadiums and billion-view music videos, each member of BTS has navigated situations that put them under a different kind of spotlight, one they didn't ask for. Privacy violations, career decisions dissected by millions, incidents that forced both the group and ARMY to confront uncomfortable questions about fame, responsibility, and where the line between public figure and private person actually sits. Some of these moments sparked outrage. Others sparked reflection. A few did both. So the real question isn't whether BTS has faced controversy. Every artist at their level has. The question is, what do these 7 specific moments reveal about the cost of being the biggest group on the planet? Let's start from number 7 and work our way up. Number 7. Jungkook, privacy issues. Being the youngest member of the world's biggest boy band comes with a level of attention most people can't begin to comprehend. For Jungkook, BTS's golden maknae, born September 1st, 1997, that attention has frequently crossed the line from admiration into invasion. Jungkook joined Big Hit Entertainment as a trainee at just 13 years old, debuting with BTS in 2013 at 15. He essentially grew up in front of cameras. And as BTS's global popularity exploded throughout the late 2010s, so did the public's fixation on every aspect of his personal life, not just his music, his dance skills, or his performances, but who he spent time with, where he went, and what he did when the cameras were supposed to be off. One of the most persistent problems Jungkook has faced involves sasang fans, a term derived from the Korean word sasang, meaning private life. These are obsessive individuals who go far beyond normal fandom behavior. Over the years, Jungkook has reportedly had to change his phone number multiple times because sasangs obtained his personal contact information and shared it. Think about that for a moment. Something as basic as a phone number, something most people never think twice about, became a recurring security concern for him. Sasangs have also been known to follow BTS members to airports, hotels, and private schedules, but Jungkook, as one of the group's most popular members globally, has been a frequent target. Then came September 2019, when a situation unfolded that put Jungkook's name in headlines for reasons entirely unrelated to music. CCTV footage surfaced showing Jungkook spending time in the Itaewon district of Seoul with a group of friends. The footage spread rapidly across Korean online communities and social media platforms. What should have been an unremarkable evening, a young man in his early 20s, hanging out with friends, was dissected frame by strangers on the internet. Big Hit Entertainment confirmed that Jungkook had simply been socializing with acquaintances. There was no scandal, no wrongdoing, just a 21-year-old doing exactly what any 21-year-old does. But the leak of that CCTV footage raised a critical question. How was private security footage obtained and distributed in the first place? Around the same period, Jungkook's visits to a tattoo shop in Seoul drew intense media scrutiny. Korean outlets, including tabloid-style publications, began speculating about a possible romantic relationship between Jungkook and a tattoo artist. The coverage wasn't based on confirmed statements from either party. It was built on photographs, location data, and conjecture. Big Hit Entertainment responded by stating that the company would not comment on the personal lives of its artists. But the damage, in terms of privacy, was already done. The tattoo artist herself faced online harassment from various corners of the internet, illustrating how the invasion of one person's privacy can have a domino effect on everyone connected to them. This pattern repeated itself over the years. Dating rumors surfaced periodically, often constructed from the thinnest evidence: an Instagram follow, a blurry photograph, a coincidence in location. Each time, the cycle was the same. Speculation would erupt on social media, Korean news outlets would pick it up, international fan communities would react, and Jungkook's personal life would become public property for days or weeks at a time. What makes Jungkook's situation particularly notable is the scale at which it operates. BTS isn't a domestically popular group with a regional fanbase. As of the early 2020s, BTS had amassed a global following estimated in the hundreds of millions across platforms. When Jungkook's personal information leaks, it doesn't circulate within a small community. It trends worldwide. His name has trended on Twitter, now X, countless times, and not always for his artistic achievements. Sometimes it trended because someone, somewhere, decided that his private moments were public entertainment. ARMY's response to these recurring invasions has been notably protective. Large segments of the fandom have consistently pushed back against the spread of private information, using hashtags to advocate for Jungkook's right to privacy and actively reporting accounts that share leaked content. Fan-organized campaigns urging respect for idols' personal boundaries have become a recurring feature within the BTS fandom, with Jungkook's experiences often cited as a primary example of why such advocacy matters. The broader conversation here extends beyond just Jungkook or even BTS. South Korea's entertainment industry has long struggled with the boundary between celebrity and personal life. The country's paparazzi culture, combined with the accessibility of CCTV footage and the speed of social media, creates an environment where privacy is difficult to maintain for anyone in the public eye. For K-pop idols specifically, the parasocial relationship between idol and fan, encouraged by the industry through content like live streams, fan meetings, and personal social media, blurs the line even further. Fans feel close to idols, and that perceived closeness can sometimes morph into a sense of entitlement over their personal information. Jungkook himself has addressed the issue indirectly at various points, expressing through live broadcasts and interactions that he values his private time and wishes certain aspects of his life could remain his own. These aren't dramatic statements, they're simple, human requests from someone who has been in the public eye since he was old enough to drive. As Jungkook began his mandatory military service, he enlisted in December 2023, the privacy conversation took on yet another dimension. Even his enlistment and military life drew levels of public attention that most soldiers would never experience. Jungkook's story is a case study in what happens when fame operates at a global scale in the age of social media. And if his situation feels concerning, the next member on this list faced a different kind of scrutiny, one where the decisions being questioned weren't his own. Number 6. Jin. Decisions under scrutiny. Kim Seokjin, known simply as Jin, carries a distinction within BTS that goes beyond vocal range or visual presence. Born December 4, 1992, he's the eldest member of the group, and in South Korean culture, that seniority carries weight. It also meant that when one of the most heavily debated questions in modern Korean pop culture emerged, Jin was the first member standing directly in its path. The question was straightforward on the surface, but enormously complex underneath. Should BTS serve in the military? South Korea's mandatory military service requires nearly all able-bodied male citizens to serve approximately 18 to 21 months in the armed forces. It is a legal obligation rooted in the country's ongoing geopolitical reality. South Korea remains technically at war with North Korea, with the 1950-53 Korean War having ended in an armistice, not a peace treaty. For decades, exemptions have existed for individuals who bring exceptional prestige to the nation in specific fields: Olympic and Asian Games medalists, classical musicians who win top prizes at designated international competitions, and certain other categories. Pop musicians, regardless of global impact, were not included. As Jin approached the age at which he would need to enlist, originally the cutoff was before turning 28 by Korean age, the debate intensified nationally. This was not a fan discussion confined to social media. It was covered by major Korean news outlets, debated in the National Assembly, and polled among the general public. Surveys conducted by Korean media organizations showed the public was genuinely split. Some argued that BTS had brought immeasurable soft power to South Korea, boosting tourism, language interest, and Korea's global cultural standing, and that exempting them was logical. Others countered that granting exemptions to pop stars would undermine the principle of universal service and create perceptions of preferential treatment. In December 2020, South Korea's National Assembly revised the Military Service Act in what the media widely dubbed the BTS Law. The amendment allowed pop culture artists who had received government medals for their contributions to national prestige to defer their enlistment until age 30 by Korean age reckoning. All 7 BTS members had received the Order of Cultural Merit from the South Korean government in 2018. The youngest recipients ever at the time. This revision gave Jin, specifically, additional time before he would need to report to duty. But deferral is not exemption, and the conversation didn't stop. Over the following 2 years, speculation continued about whether a full exemption might eventually be granted, whether the group would enlist together or individually, and what the timeline would look like. Hybe Corporation, the parent company of BTS's label Big Hit Music, found itself navigating public, political, and commercial pressures simultaneously. Every statement, or lack of statement, from the company was analyzed for clues. In October 2022, Hybe announced that all BTS members would fulfill their mandatory military service, with Jin set to enlist first. The announcement came after months of speculation and effectively closed the exemption debate. Jin himself had previously indicated in a Weverse live broadcast that he was prepared to serve when called upon, a statement that many armies interpreted as Jin quietly taking the pressure off the ongoing political discussion. Before enlisting, Jin released his solo single, The Astronaut, on October 28, 2022, co-written with Coldplay. It debuted at #1 on multiple charts and served as his farewell to fans before his military hiatus. His final public performance of the song was at Coldplay's concert in Buenos Aires, Argentina, a moment that carried significant emotional weight for the fandom, knowing it would be the last time they'd see him perform live for over a year. Jin enlisted on December 13, 2022, entering the Yeoncheon Army Training Center in Gyeonggi Province. He became the first BTS member to begin active duty, setting the precedent for the remaining 6 members who would follow in subsequent months. But the scrutiny didn't end at enlistment. Jin's military service itself drew attention. Reports of his assignment, his training progress, and even photos from within the military circulated online, again raising questions about how much privacy a public figure retains, even while serving. In an environment where most soldiers experience relative anonymity, Jin's service was anything but anonymous. Beyond the military question, Jin's career decisions, or more precisely, the decisions made on his behalf, have long been a topic of discussion among armies. Jin graduated from Konkuk University with a degree in art and film, and later pursued graduate studies at Hanyang Cyber University. Fans have frequently pointed out that despite his academic background in acting, Hybe did not actively pursue acting opportunities for him in the way that some other entertainment companies do for their idol actors. Whether this was a strategic choice by the company, a personal preference of Jin's, or a combination of both, has never been definitively clarified in public, but it has fueled recurring conversations within fan communities. Similarly, discussions arose about the distribution of solo opportunities among BTS members during their active years. Jin released solo tracks within BTS albums, including Awake, Epiphany, and Moon, and the digital single Yours as an OST for the Korean drama Yiri-san in 2021. However, compared to some members who pursued more extensive solo projects prior to the group's collective military enlistment, questions about whether Jin received equitable promotional support were raised by segments of the fandom. These discussions are sensitive because they touch on the internal workings of an artist-agency relationship that the public sees from the outside. Fans see outputs, releases, schedules, appearances, and draw conclusions about the decisions behind them. But the full picture, including contractual details, personal preferences, and internal planning, remains largely invisible. Jin was discharged from military service on June 12, 2024, becoming the first BTS member to complete his service. His discharge drew significant media coverage, and he was greeted by fellow BTS members at the military base, a moment widely shared across social media. What Jin's story illustrates is the unique position of being the eldest in a group where age has real-world implications beyond group dynamics. The military debate wasn't just about pop culture, it was about national policy, and Jin was the face of it whether he chose to be or not. Every timeline, every deferral, every decision was filtered through his position as the member closest to the deadline. And if the weight of public decisions defined Jin's experience, the next member on this list faced a different kind of intensity, one where public opinion moved fast and hit hard.
Number 5. Jimin, heated controversies. Park Jimin has one of the most recognizable names in global entertainment. Born October 13, 1995 in Busan, South Korea, he trained in contemporary dance at Busan High School of Arts before joining Big Hit Entertainment and debuting with BTS in 2013. Known for his fluid dance style, distinctive vocal tone, and intense stage presence, Jimin has consistently ranked among the most popular K-pop idols worldwide. But popularity at that scale comes with a specific kind of vulnerability. When controversy hits, it hits at full volume. The single most internationally impactful controversy Jimin faced occurred in late 2018, and it centered on a piece of clothing. Earlier that year, photographs circulated showing Jimin wearing a t-shirt that bore a specific and historically charged image. The shirt featured a photograph of Korean citizens celebrating their liberation from Japanese colonial rule on August 15, 1945, alongside an image depicting the atomic bombing, a mushroom cloud, that had struck Japan days earlier, contributing to the end of World War II, and consequently the end of Japan's 35-year colonial occupation of Korea. The shirt also included the repeated English phrase, patriotism, our history, liberation, Korea. The context here requires understanding a wound that remains open in East Asian geopolitics. Japan's colonization of Korea from 1910 to 1945 involved forced labor, cultural suppression, and systemic exploitation. For many Koreans, August 15th represents not just the end of a war, but the reclamation of national identity. At the same time, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed an estimated 110,000 to 210,000 people, including Korean forced laborers who were in Japan at the time. The intersection of Korean liberation and atomic devastation is historically inseparable, but displaying imagery of the bombings is deeply sensitive in Japan, where the events represent civilian tragedy on a catastrophic scale. When the photographs of Jimin wearing the shirt resurfaced and gained traction on Japanese social media in November 2018, the reaction was swift. Japanese media covered the story extensively. TV Asahi canceled BTS's scheduled appearance on Music Station, one of Japan's most prominent music programs, citing the need to review the situation. The cancellation made headlines across both countries and rippled into international entertainment news. Big Hit Entertainment responded with an official statement. The agency apologized, stating that the T-shirt was not intended to hurt or disrespect the victims of the atomic bombings, and that the company was sorry for any pain caused. The statement emphasized that BTS did not support the use of war imagery and that the company would be more careful about such matters in the future. Notably, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, an international Jewish human rights organization, also weighed in during this period, though their statement addressed a separate but overlapping issue involving BTS-related imagery that had circulated around the same time, including a photoshoot concept that featured hats resembling Nazi-era insignia. Big Hit issued a broader apology addressing multiple concerns simultaneously. For Jimin specifically, the T-shirt situation was complicated. He wore a piece of clothing that reflected a real and legitimate moment of Korean national pride. Liberation from colonial rule is a foundational event in modern Korean identity. But the inclusion of atomic bomb imagery made it simultaneously painful from a Japanese perspective. Jimin was caught at the intersection of two nations' historical traumas, and regardless of his personal intent, the controversy became international news. The fallout extended beyond a single canceled TV appearance. BTS's relationship with the Japanese market, one of the most commercially significant music markets in the world and a critical revenue source for K-pop groups, was temporarily strained. Some Japanese fans expressed disappointment. Some Korean fans defended Jimin, arguing that Korean liberation shouldn't require apology. Online discourse became polarized along national and political lines, with Jimin's name at the center of arguments he hadn't initiated but couldn't escape. Jimin's other reasons for being trending were beyond his own control. Over the years, he has been the target of various unsubstantiated rumors that spread across Korean online communities and social media platforms. Allegations and claims, ranging from personal behavior to interactions with others, have periodically surfaced, often without credible sourcing. In the landscape of Korean internet culture, where anonymous forums and rapid information sharing can amplify unverified claims within hours, Jimin's high profile has made him a recurring target for both genuine criticism and baseless speculation. Jimin has also been publicly open about his struggles with body image and the pressures of maintaining a certain appearance as an idol. During BTS's earlier years, particularly around the 2016 Wings era, Jimin spoke candidly about extreme dieting and skipping meals, at one point revealing that he would go extended periods without eating properly. These admissions resonated deeply with fans, but also raised uncomfortable questions about the physical expectations placed on idols within the K-pop industry. While not a controversy in the traditional sense, Jimin's openness about this topic turned it into a public conversation about industry standards, and his name became associated with broader critiques of how entertainment companies manage their artists' health and well-being. What made Jimin's various controversies particularly intense was the speed and scale at which they unfolded. By 2018, BTS was firmly established as a global act. Their fanbase army operated across every major social media platform in dozens of languages. When the T-shirt issue broke, it didn't develop over days in a single market. It exploded simultaneously across Japanese Twitter, Korean Naver, English-language entertainment outlets, and fan forums worldwide. The discourse moved faster than any official response could keep up, and by the time Big Hit issued their statement, the narrative had already been shaped, reshaped, and entrenched along competing lines. Jimin's solo career, which gained momentum with his debut solo album, Face, in March 2023, offered a different kind of public conversation, one centered on artistry rather than controversy. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, and its lead single, Like Crazy, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Jimin the first Korean solo artist to top that chart. But even success at that level doesn't erase the memory of past controversies. It simply adds layers to an already complex public image. What Jimin's experiences collectively demonstrate is the particular challenge of being a globally visible figure whose every action, intentional or not, is filtered through multiple cultural lenses simultaneously. A t-shirt purchased in one country carries different weight in another. A personal health struggle becomes a public talking point. A rumor posted anonymously gains traction simply because the name attached to it is famous enough to generate clicks. And if Jimin's controversies moved fast, the next member on this list faced a single incident that didn't just trend, it dominated the conversation.
Number 4. Suga, a shocking incident. Yoongi, known worldwide as Suga, has built a reputation as one of the most respected musical minds in K-pop. Born March 9, 1993, in Daegu, South Korea, he arrived at Big Hit Entertainment with a background in underground rap and production, bringing a raw authenticity that became a defining element of BTS's sound. Beyond his work with the group, his solo projects under the name August D earned critical praise for their unfiltered honesty about mental health, ambition, and personal struggle. Suga's public image was largely defined by his artistry and his no-nonsense demeanor, which made what happened in August 2020 all the more jarring. On the night of August 3, 2020, Suga was found by police officers near his residence in the Hanam-dong area of Seoul after he had fallen off an electric scooter. When officers arrived at the scene, they administered a breathalyzer test. The results showed that Suga's blood alcohol content exceeded the legal limit for operating a motorized vehicle in South Korea. He was subsequently booked by the Yongsan police station on suspicion of violating the Road Traffic Act. The detail that caught many people off guard was the vehicle in question, an electric scooter. To some, it seemed like a minor, almost trivial distinction. But under South Korean law, the situation was unambiguous. Just 2 months before the incident, in June 2020, revised traffic regulations had gone into effect that reclassified personal mobility devices, including electric scooters, as motorized vehicles. This meant that operating one while intoxicated was subject to the same DUI laws that applied to cars and motorcycles. The legal threshold was clear: a blood alcohol concentration of 0.03% or higher constituted a violation. Suga was above that line. Big Hit Entertainment moved quickly. The agency released an official statement confirming the incident, acknowledging that Suga had consumed alcohol and subsequently rode an electric scooter to travel a short distance to his home. The statement described the distance as approximately 500 meters. The company apologized to fans and the public, stating that the incident should not have occurred regardless of the circumstances. Suga himself posted a personal apology on Weverse, BTS's official fan communication platform. His statement was direct. He acknowledged that he had made a mistake, expressed regret for causing concern and disappointment to fans, and took full responsibility for his actions. He did not offer excuses or attempt to minimize the situation. He stated that he had been unaware that electric scooters fell under DUI regulations following the recent legal revision, but he also made clear that ignorance of the law did not absolve him of responsibility. The legal consequences followed standard procedure. Suga received a summary fine, reported by Korean media as approximately 1 million Korean won, roughly equivalent to $830 at the time, and his driver's license was suspended. He was not detained or formally indicted, as the case was processed through a summary indictment, which is standard in South Korea for first-time, non-injury DUI offenses involving lower blood alcohol levels. But the public conversation went far beyond the legal resolution. In South Korea, DUI, regardless of the vehicle involved, is treated as a serious social issue. The country had tightened its DUI laws significantly following a string of high-profile fatal drunk driving accidents, and public tolerance for impaired driving had dropped sharply. The so-called Yoon Chang-ho Act, named after a victim of a drunk driving accident in 2018, had strengthened penalties and lowered the legal blood alcohol threshold. Suga's incident landed in the middle of this heightened cultural sensitivity around DUI offenses. Korean media coverage was extensive. News outlets ranging from major broadcasters like KBS and SBS to entertainment-focused publications reported on the case for days. Online communities, Naver, Dom, and various Korean forums debated the incident with the kind of intensity reserved for high-profile public figures. Opinions were divided. Some argued that riding an electric scooter for 500 meters was vastly different from driving a car on a highway. Others maintained that the law was the law, the line had been crossed, and Suga's fame shouldn't factor into how the incident was evaluated. Internationally, ARMY's reaction was similarly split. A significant portion of the fanbase expressed disappointment, but emphasized that Suga had taken responsibility promptly and without deflection. Others argued that the media was disproportionately focused on the incident relative to its severity, pointing out that no one was injured and that the scooter was operated over a very short distance at low speed. Critics outside the fandom, meanwhile, used the incident to raise broader questions about celebrity accountability and whether public apologies from entertainment agencies are genuine or merely damage control. What made the situation particularly significant within the BTS context was how it intersected with Suga's carefully built public persona. Here was an artist who had spoken openly in his music about depression, anxiety, and the pressures of fame, someone whose lyrics explicitly rejected pretense and embraced accountability. The DUI incident tested whether that persona held up under real-world scrutiny. To his credit, Suga's response aligned with the honesty he'd built his identity around. He didn't hide behind his agency. He didn't go silent. He addressed it head-on. Hybe, Big Hit's parent company, also faced questions about how it handled the situation. Some observers felt the agency responded appropriately, with a timely and transparent statement. Others questioned whether the company should have taken additional steps, such as temporarily suspending Suga's public activities. In the end, no formal hiatus was imposed, and Suga continued his activities with BTS without a public pause, a decision that drew both support and criticism depending on who was commenting. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about the legal implications of electric scooter use in South Korea. The 2020 reclassification of personal mobility devices was still relatively new, and public awareness about the specific regulations, including the DUI provisions, was inconsistent. Several legal commentators noted in the wake of the Suga incident that many Korean citizens were similarly unaware that riding an electric scooter after drinking was legally equivalent to driving a car drunk. In an unintended way, the high-profile nature of the case raised public awareness about laws that affected far more people than just one idol. For Suga personally, the incident became a permanent fixture in his public narrative. Every profile, every career summary, every biographical article written about him from that point forward included a reference to the electric scooter DUI. That's the nature of public life at the BTS level. Moments don't fade. They get archived and indexed forever. Suga enlisted for his mandatory military service in September 2023, fulfilling his obligation as a social service agent due to a shoulder injury he'd sustained prior to debut. His enlistment shifted the public conversation back to his career and service, but the 2020 incident remains a chapter that neither fans nor critics have entirely set aside. If Suga's controversy was a singular, clearly defined event, the next member on this list faced something more diffuse, a slow, relentless erosion of boundaries that raised fundamental questions about what a public figure is entitled to keep private. Number 3. Taehyung, privacy boundaries. Kim Taehyung, known to the world as V, is often described as one of the most visually recognizable figures in modern pop culture. Born December 30th, 1995, in Daegu, South Korea, he joined BTS after initially auditioning as a background companion for a friend and being unexpectedly scouted by Big Hit Entertainment. His deep baritone vocals, unconventional charisma, and artistic sensibility made him a standout within the group, and his individual popularity grew to the point where his every public appearance could generate international headlines. But that level of visibility came with a cost that went beyond anything the usual celebrity spotlight entails. Taehyung's privacy has been breached in ways that crossed not just ethical lines, but potentially legal ones. The The most significant privacy controversy surrounding Taehyung unfolded over the course of 2022, when private photographs allegedly showing him with Blackpink member Jennie Kim began surfacing online. The photos appeared on social media platforms and anonymous forums in a staggered pattern, not all at once, but over a period of weeks and months, suggesting that whoever was releasing them had access to a collection of images and was distributing them deliberately over time. The photographs depicted what appeared to be private moments, casual settings, personal outings, and situations clearly not intended for public consumption. Some images were alleged to have been taken during a trip to Jeju Island. The source of the photographs was never officially confirmed, but widespread speculation pointed toward a potential hacking of personal devices or cloud storage accounts. If true, this would constitute a serious criminal act under South Korean law. The Personal Information Protection Act and the Act on Promotion of Information and Communications, Network Utilization, and Information Protection both carry penalties for unauthorized access to and distribution of private digital content. The online reaction was immediate and chaotic. Fan communities across both BTS and Blackpink fandoms split along multiple lines. Some fans accepted the photos as genuine and debated the implications. Others insisted the images were fabricated or digitally manipulated, producing frame-by-frame analyses to argue their case. Still others, and this group grew louder as more photos appeared, focused not on whether the relationship was real, but on how the photos had been obtained in the first place. For this contingent, the central issue wasn't who Taehyung was spending time with, but the fact that someone had apparently accessed and leaked private images without consent. The agencies involved handled the situation with measured ambiguity. Hybe, BTS's parent company, did not initially issue a direct confirmation or denial regarding the relationship. YG Entertainment, which manages Blackpink, similarly refrained from making a definitive public statement for an extended period. This silence, while understandable from a corporate communications standpoint, neither company wanted to set a precedent of commenting on artists' personal relationships, left a vacuum that was immediately filled by speculation, fan theories, and media reporting of varying reliability. Korean media outlets covered the leaked photos extensively, with entertainment publications analyzing each image and soliciting commentary from unnamed industry insiders. International media followed suit, with outlets from the United States, Southeast Asia, and Europe picking up the story. For Taehyung, whose personal life had previously been relatively shielded compared to some of his bandmates, the sudden and involuntary exposure was a stark escalation. Reports eventually surfaced in late 2022 and into early 2023 indicating that Taehyung and Jennie had indeed been in a relationship but had since parted ways. But by the time any semblance of clarity emerged, the damage to the principle of privacy had already been done. Months of leaked photos, invasive coverage, and public dissection of a private relationship had played out across every major social media platform in real time. This wasn't the first time Taehyung's personal boundaries had been tested. Like his bandmates, he has dealt with satiating fans throughout his career, individuals who track idols' movements, obtain private schedules, and sometimes show up at private locations. Taehyung's daily life, from restaurant visits to airport arrivals, has been documented by fans and paparazzi with a thoroughness that leaves almost no room for anonymity. But the 2022 photo leaks represented something qualitatively different. This wasn't a fan with a camera at an airport. This was someone with access to private, personal content that existed only in digital storage, content that was never meant to be seen by anyone other than the people in the images. The incident also raised questions about the security infrastructure that entertainment companies provide for their artists. In an era where personal devices contain vast amounts of private data, messages, photographs, financial information, location history, the protection of that data is not merely a personal responsibility, but arguably a duty of care for the companies that profit from their artists' public image. Whether Hybe had adequate cybersecurity protocols in place for its artists, and whether the leak prompted any internal review, has not been publicly disclosed. When Taehyung opened his personal Instagram account in December 2021, alongside all BTS members, who launched individual accounts simultaneously, it created another layer of public scrutiny. His posts, follows, unfollows, and even the timing of his uploads were analyzed by fans and media alike for clues about his personal life. An Instagram follow could generate news articles. An unfollowed account could spark days of speculation. For most people, social media is a space for casual self-expression. For Taehyung, every digital action became a data point in a public investigation into his private life. His appearances at high-profile public events further illustrated the intensity of the attention. When Taehyung attended Paris Fashion Week events for Celine, the luxury brand for which he served as a global ambassador, his presence generated scenes of massive crowd gatherings that disrupted traffic and required significant security coordination. The line between professional appearance and personal invasion blurred, as photographers and fans alike competed to capture every angle of his presence. For many armies, Taehyung's experiences crystallized an uncomfortable truth about the K-pop industry and celebrity culture more broadly. The parasocial dynamic, the one-sided sense of intimacy that fans develop toward public figures, can create a sense of entitlement to personal information. When an idol shares aspects of their life through official content, some members of the public interpret that openness as an invitation to access everything, including the parts that were never offered. Taehyung enlisted for military service on December 11, 2023, joining the same recruit training center as several other BTS members. His enlistment brought a temporary reprieve from the relentless cycle of personal scrutiny, though even his military service was subject to public attention in ways that ordinary soldiers never experience. The question Taehyung's situation leaves behind isn't really about him specifically, it's about the system. When private photographs can be stolen and distributed without consequence, when every social media interaction becomes a headline, and when the public feels justified in knowing everything about a person simply because that person is famous, where exactly does the right to privacy begin? And if Taehyung faced the consequences of that question in his personal life, the next member on this list confronted a different, but equally relentless form of scrutiny, one that came not from leaked photos or dating rumors, but from the sheer weight of being the person everyone expects to speak for the group. Number 2. RM, the pressure of leadership. Namjoon didn't just become the leader of BTS. He became the voice of a generation, and then had to live with the consequences of every word that voice produced. Born September 12, 1994, in Ilsan, a satellite city northwest of Seoul, Namjoon, known as RM, was recruited by Big Hit Entertainment after the agency's founder, Bang Si-hyuk, heard his underground rap performances. He was the first member to join what would eventually become BTS, and when the group debuted in 2013, the then 18-year-old was designated as leader. In most K-pop groups, the leader role involves coordinating group activities, speaking on behalf of the team, and serving as a bridge between the members and management. For RM, the role evolved into something far heavier. He became the primary international spokesperson for the most globally visible musical act to emerge from Asia, a position that placed every sentence he uttered under a microscope capable of magnification no public figure should reasonably be expected to withstand. The most prominent stage for that pressure was the United Nations. In September 2018, RM stood before the UN General Assembly and delivered a speech as part of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited initiative, launching BTS's Love Myself campaign. He spoke in English, a language he largely taught himself by watching the American sitcom Friends, about self-acceptance, the pressures facing young people, and the importance of speaking one's truth. The speech was widely praised, viewed millions of times online, and positioned BTS as more than entertainers. They were now cultural representatives on a global diplomatic stage. RM returned to the UN in subsequent years via a recorded message during the 2020 session held virtually due to COVID-19, and in person again in 2021 as special presidential envoys for future generations and culture, appointed by South Korean President Moon Jae-in. In 2022, he addressed the General Assembly once more. Each time, his words weren't merely heard, they were parsed, translated, analyzed, and debated across dozens of languages and cultures simultaneously. A single phrasing choice could generate both praise and criticism, depending on the audience interpreting it. That kind of scrutiny would be challenging for a trained diplomat with decades of experience. RM was a musician in his mid-20s. But the pressure didn't begin at the United Nations. It began much earlier and from a very different direction, his own past work. As BTS rose to global prominence in the mid to late 2010s, critics and observers revisited RM's earlier lyrics from his pre-debut and early career period when he performed under the name Rap Monster. Some of those lyrics, written when Namjoon was a teenager immersed in South Korea's underground hip-hop scene, contained language that was later identified as misogynistic. Lines that reflected the bravado and provocative posturing common in certain subgenres of rap were re-examined through the lens of BTS's growing influence and their messaging about self-love and empowerment. RM addressed this directly. In 2015, as BTS was gaining significant traction, but before their global breakthrough, he publicly apologized for the content of his earlier lyrics. He acknowledged that the language was wrong, that he had grown, and that he took responsibility for words he had written as a younger, less aware version of himself. The apology was not prompted by a legal issue or a formal complaint. It was a voluntary reckoning with his own creative history. For some, the apology was sufficient evidence of growth. For others, particularly those encountering BTS for the first time years later, the old lyrics remained a point of contention that resurfaced periodically. Discussions about cultural appropriation also intersected with RM's position as leader. BTS's musical foundation is rooted in hip-hop, a genre created by Black Americans. As the group gained global popularity, conversations emerged about whether Korean artists adopting hip-hop aesthetics, including certain hairstyles and stylistic choices, constituted appropriation. RM, as both the group's leader and its most lyrically prolific rapper, was frequently the focal point of these discussions. He engaged with the topic in interviews, expressing respect for hip-hop's origins and acknowledging the complexity of cross-cultural artistic exchange. But the conversation never fully resolved, because it's a conversation that extends far beyond any single artist or group. Perhaps the most emotionally charged moment of RM's leadership came on June 14, 2022, BTS's 9th anniversary, during the annual Festa celebration. In a now iconic dinner video, the 7 members sat together and spoke candidly about their feelings, their exhaustion, and their need to explore individual paths. RM, as leader, bore much of the weight of articulating what was happening. He spoke about feeling lost creatively, about the difficulty of maintaining authenticity within the machinery of global fame, and about the members' collective decision to focus on solo activities. The immediate public reaction was seismic. The word hiatus spread across social media within minutes. Hybe's stock price dropped sharply. Reports indicated a loss of approximately $1.7 billion in market value within a single trading day. Hybe subsequently issued a clarification stating that BTS was not disbanding and that the group would continue to be active, but the damage to investor confidence had already registered. For RM, who had spoken with raw vulnerability about his personal creative struggles, watching his words get filtered through financial markets and stock tickers must have been a surreal experience. He opened up about artistic identity, and the world responded with stock analysis. This is the fundamental paradox of RM's position. He is expected to be emotionally honest. The BTS brand is built substantially on authenticity, but every honest statement carries consequences that extend into commerce, diplomacy, and public relations. When he speaks about struggle, fans worry. When he speaks about the group's future, markets react. When he speaks about social issues, political commentators weigh in. There is no neutral ground for the leader of BTS. His solo work has reflected this tension. RM's solo album Indigo, released in December 2022, was a deeply personal project that explored themes of identity, aging, and finding meaning beyond fame. Featuring collaborations with artists like Erykah Badu, Anderson .Paak, and Eugene of the Korean rock band Cherry Filter, The album was critically well received and debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. But even its release was contextualized by his role. Reviews inevitably discussed it in relation to BTS, to the hiatus, to the military enlistment that would follow. RM enlisted for military service on December 11, 2023, entering active duty alongside other BTS members. His enlistment marked another chapter in a career defined by carrying responsibilities that most 29-year-olds never encounter, responsibilities he didn't inherit but built, one speech, one lyric, one public statement at a time. The weight of leadership isn't always visible. It doesn't always produce dramatic headlines or trending hashtags. Sometimes it's simply the accumulated pressure of knowing that millions of people are listening and that whatever you say next will be simultaneously praised, criticized, translated, misquoted, and remembered. And if RM's story is about the burden of words, the final member on this list faced a moment where it wasn't words, but a single decision that caught the entire fandom off guard. Number 1. J-Hope, a surprising decision. Young Hoseok has spent his entire career defying the box people try to put him in. Born February 18, 1994, in Gwangju, South Korea, the member known as J-Hope arrived at Big Hit Entertainment as a street dancer with competition credentials. He had been part of the underground dance crew Neuron and had won a national dance competition before being accepted as a trainee. Within BTS, he became the group's main dancer and a key rapper, but his public identity crystallized around something less tangible and far more powerful: energy. J-Hope was sunshine. He was the member who lit up rooms, whose laugh was a sound effect unto itself, whose entire presence seemed calibrated to make everyone around him feel more alive. That identity was real, but it was never the whole story. And in 2022, J-Hope made a series of decisions that showed the world exactly how much more there was. The first signal came with his solo album Jack in the Box, released on July 15, 2022. If fans were expecting something in the vein of Hope World, his 2018 mixtape, which was bright, playful, and colorful, debuting at number 38 on the Billboard 200 and becoming the highest charting album by a Korean solo artist at the time, they were about to recalibrate. Jack in the Box was a deliberate departure. The album drew from old-school hip-hop, punk, and grunge influences, with tracks that were aggressive, stripped down, and tonally darker than anything J-Hope had released before. The lead single, More, opened with distorted guitars and a driving beat that sounded nothing like the J-Hope most casual listeners knew. The follow-up single, Arson, continued in that direction, exploring themes of burnout, ambition, and the double-edged nature of passion. Lyrically, J-Hope was interrogating his own relationship with performance and success, asking, in essence, whether the fire that drives you can also consume you. For an artist whose public persona was defined by optimism, this was a bold, creative pivot. It wasn't manufactured edge for the sake of reinvention. It was an artist expanding the boundaries of what the public had been allowed to see. The critical response was largely positive. Music publications noted the album's willingness to take risks, and fans who followed J-Hope's artistry closely appreciated the depth. But there was also a segment of the audience that struggled with the tonal shift. Some fans openly expressed that they missed the brighter, more accessible sound of Hope World. This reaction itself became part of the story, an illustration of the tension that exists when an artist's public identity becomes so fixed that any evolution feels like a disruption. Then came Lollapalooza. On July 31, 2022, J-Hope took the main stage at Lollapalooza in Chicago, Illinois, becoming the first South Korean artist to headline a major American music festival. Lollapalooza, founded in 1991 by Jane's Addiction frontman Perry Farrell, is one of the most established festival brands in the world, drawing hundreds of thousands of attendees annually. For J-Hope to headline wasn't a symbolic gesture, it was a statement of artistic legitimacy in a market and format where K-pop acts had historically been positioned as novelty bookings rather than headliners. The performance was significant for multiple reasons. J-Hope performed material from Jack in the Box alongside BTS hits, commanding a crowd that extended deep into Chicago's Grant Park. Reviews from major American outlets, including Billboard and Variety, highlighted his stage presence and the energy he brought to a festival audience that was demographically and culturally different from a typical BTS concert crowd. He wasn't performing in a controlled arena environment for a dedicated fan base. He was performing outdoors, in the heat, for a mixed audience that included K-pop fans, casual festival goers, and people who had never heard a BTS song in their lives. And he held them. The Lollapalooza headline performance also carried weight as a representation moment. For Korean artists, breaking into the American festival circuit at the headliner level had been an unachieved milestone. J-Hope's booking and subsequent delivery opened a conversation about whether more Korean acts could follow that path, not as opening acts or mid-afternoon curiosities, but as top-billed performers capable of anchoring an entire festival evening. But perhaps the decision that caught the fandom most off guard came less than a year later. On April 18, 2023, J-Hope enlisted for mandatory military service, entering the 36th Infantry Division Recruit Training Center in Wonju, Gangwon Province. He was the second BTS member to enlist, following Jin's December 2022 induction. What made J-Hope's enlistment particularly notable was his choice to serve as an active-duty soldier. In the South Korean military system, there are different service tracks. Some individuals, depending on circumstances, may qualify for alternative service options that involve shorter periods of active combat training. J-Hope chose the standard active duty route, the most demanding option, involving a full training regimen and approximately 18 months of service. The decision was interpreted by many as a deliberate statement that he intended to fulfill his obligation fully and without any perception of receiving special treatment. During his military service, J-Hope earned recognition that further surprised observers. Reports confirmed that he was promoted to the role of assistant instructor, a position given to soldiers who demonstrate exceptional performance during basic training. Being selected as an assistant instructor meant that J-Hope was responsible for helping train incoming recruits, a role that required discipline, leadership, and physical competence. For a global pop star entering the military at age 29, earning that distinction was not a given. It was earned. His enlistment was documented in part through J-Hope in the Box, a documentary released on Disney Plus in February 2023, which chronicled his journey through the Jack in the Box album creation and the Lollapalooza performance. The documentary offered a rare, unfiltered look at the internal pressures J-Hope navigated, the self-doubt behind the confidence, the creative anxiety behind the polished performances, and the emotional complexity behind the ever-present smile. For fans accustomed to seeing J-Hope as BTS's inexhaustible source of energy, the documentary revealed that the energy wasn't effortless. It was a choice made daily, often against the weight of exhaustion and uncertainty. J-Hope was discharged from military service on October 17, 2024, completing his duty and returning to civilian life. His discharge was met with significant attention from both fans and media, marking another milestone in the gradual return of BTS members from military service. What makes J-Hope's story particularly compelling as the #1 entry on this list isn't scandal or controversy in the traditional sense. It's the surprise of watching someone systematically dismantle the comfortable image the public had built around them, not through reckless behavior or public missteps, but through deliberate artistic and personal choices. He released an album that challenged listener expectations. He headlined a festival stage where no Korean artist had stood before. He enlisted voluntarily in the most demanding service track available. And he excelled. The fandom's reaction across all of these decisions followed a pattern: initial surprise, followed by debate, followed by deeper respect. Each choice forced armies to confront the difference between who they imagined J-Hope to be and who he actually was, and to realize that the real person was more interesting than the projection. For J-Hope, the message was consistent throughout: being the sunshine doesn't mean you can't also be the storm. Those are 7 moments, 7 chapters from 7 different lives that tested the relationship between BTS and the world watching them. And when you step back and look at them together, a pattern emerges that goes beyond any single headline or trending hashtag. Jungkook's story was about the erosion of personal space, a young man whose phone number, restaurant visits, and private evenings became public property simply because he happened to be extraordinarily famous. Jin's was about decisions made at the intersection of national policy and personal duty, a career shaped not just by artistic ambition, but by a mandatory military obligation that became a national debate. Jimin faced the collision of history and clothing, where a t-shirt designed to celebrate Korean liberation became an international incident because the same event that freed one nation devastated another. Suga confronted the reality that a single mistake, even one involving a short ride on an electric scooter, becomes permanent public record when you're one of the most recognizable people on the planet. Taehyung's experience exposed the terrifying vulnerability of private digital life, where personal photographs can be stolen and distributed to millions without consent or consequence. RM carried the invisible burden of leadership, every word weighed, every statement analyzed, every moment of vulnerability converted into stock market data. And J-Hope challenged the fandom's assumptions about who he was by making bold artistic and personal decisions that didn't match the comfortable image the public had constructed for him. 7 different situations. 7 different kinds of pressure. But one common thread runs through all of them: the cost of existing at the center of global attention in the age of social media. BTS didn't become the biggest group in the world by accident. Their rise was built on genuine talent, relentless work, strategic timing, and an unprecedented connection with their fanbase. But that connection, the very thing that makes BTS special, is also what makes moments like these so intense. When millions of people feel personally invested in 7 individuals, every controversy is amplified, every decision is scrutinized, and every mistake is archived forever. There is no quiet resolution. There is no private reckoning. Everything plays out in real time, across every platform, in every language, under the gaze of an audience that never sleeps. And this raises a question that extends far beyond BTS. What do we, as consumers of celebrity culture, actually owe the people we follow? The instinct is to say nothing, they chose fame, they benefit from it financially, and public scrutiny is simply part of the deal. And there's some truth to that. Public figures, by definition, live partially in public. But partially is the key word. There is a difference between holding a public figure accountable for their professional actions and feeling entitled to their private photographs. There is a difference between discussing a genuine controversy and manufacturing outrage from unverified rumors. There is a difference between being a fan and being a surveillance system. The BTS members themselves have navigated these situations with varying degrees of public response. Some addressed controversies directly: Suga's personal apology on Weverse, RM's acknowledgement of his earlier lyrics, Big Hit's formal statements on multiple occasions. Others chose silence, allowing the noise to subside on its own timeline. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong. Both reflect the impossible calculus of public life. Speak, and your words become ammunition for both supporters and critics. Stay silent, and the vacuum fills with speculation. For ARMY specifically, these 7 situations have served as tests of the fandom's values. At their best, ARMYs have organized campaigns to protect members' privacy, pushed back against misinformation, and demonstrated that fan loyalty can coexist with honest acknowledgement of imperfection. At more complicated moments, the fandom has grappled with internal disagreements about how to respond, whether to defend unconditionally, to criticize constructively, or to simply wait for facts before reacting. These are not easy questions, and the fandom has not always answered them uniformly. But the fact that the conversation happens at all, that a fan community of this scale engages with nuance rather than defaulting entirely to blind loyalty, is itself noteworthy. It is also important, critically important, to distinguish between confirmed facts, media reports, and rumors that circulate online. Not everything published about BTS is true. Not every anonymous forum post is credible. Not every viral claim has been verified. In the information ecosystem surrounding K-pop, where content moves at extraordinary speed and emotional investment is high, the temptation to accept sensational claims at face value is constant. Resisting that temptation isn't just good practice, it's a form of respect. Respect for the members as human beings, respect for the truth as a principle, and respect for yourself as someone capable of critical thinking. BTS will return from military service. The group has stated their intention to reconvene, and Hybe has publicly affirmed plans for the group's future activities. When they do come back, they will return not as the untested rookies who debuted from a small agency in 2013, but as individuals who have each weathered public storms and emerged with their core identities intact. The controversies discussed in this video are part of their story, but they are not the entirety of it. They are chapters, some difficult, some uncomfortable, some unjust, in a narrative that is still being written. So here's the question we'll leave you with. Which member do you think faced the most difficult situation? Was it the invasion of privacy, the weight of national debate, the collision of historical sensitivities, a legal misstep, stolen photographs, the burden of leadership, or the challenge of redefining yourself against public expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Disagree with the ranking. Offer your perspective. But as you do, remember this. Behind every headline, every trending topic, and every viral post, there is a real person. A person who didn't sign up to have their phone hacked, their scooter ride prosecuted on national television, or their private dinner analyzed by strangers across 12 time zones. Respect the facts. Question the rumors. And never forget that the people on your screen are exactly that people. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.